All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Just as a reminder, we are recording this webinar and it will be available for publication on Monday. Welcome to our presentation on cybersecurity for the therapy provider, finding a practical balance between security and productivity. I will be your host, Christy Covington. I'm the Executive Director for NARA, and joining me today are our speakers, Michael Duncan and Matthew McGarvey. And we're going to cover just a few of our housekeeping tips today to make sure that this webinar goes nice and smoothly. As I mentioned previously, we are recording this webinar and it will be available on NARA's general website and on the NARA member portal on Monday, March 17th. You can find it on the general website by going to www.naranet.org, clicking on the Resources tab, and then selecting Quick Links. If you have questions for our speakers regarding today's presentation, we request that you use the Q&A button that is located in the attendee panel. If you have questions regarding just general NARA questions, technical questions, please use the chat button that is located in your attendee toolbar as well. So now I will go ahead and turn this over to our speakers, Matt and Michael.
Well, thank you, Christy. We appreciate it. We're really looking forward to having this discussion and presentation. I'll start with introductions. My name is Mike Duncan. I'm with the Center for Internet Security, CIS. And as far as background goes, I have been in cybersecurity and technology for the last 25 years in various roles at large companies like Microsoft and Dell, all the way down to some startups that are focused on cybersecurity and healthcare. Spent a bit of time at HCA as well, where I really got to understand the needs of clinicians in a care environment, and I'm really excited to share what we are going to share with you today about that.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. I'm Matt McGarvey, also from CIS Strategic Healthcare Team, lifelong healthcare advocate. Especially in long-term care, many years with Harmony Healthcare, language fundamentals. And I like to think that I understand the world of the clinician and the therapist. So we're really excited to be with all the audience here today. The Center for Internet Security is a relatively new member of NARA. Founded in 2000, we're an independent nonprofit cybersecurity partner for public and private organizations around the world. Here in our 25th anniversary year, it's our mission to make the connected world a safer place by developing best practice solutions that help people, businesses, and governments protect themselves from pervasive cyber threat. At CIS, we collaborate with the global community of experts to help validate and promote best practice solutions. Our consensus-based best practices provide organizations of all shapes and sizes with actionable recommendations to enhance your cyber defense. While the geographic scope of our mission is very broad, it's the entire world. That world is getting smaller every single day because more and more lives are connected to the internet and networked together. That makes our vision of how we accomplish our mission even more important today than when we started 25 years ago. Securing and instilling confidence in an increasingly connected world requires a trusted leader like CIS to bring together the global community of cybersecurity experts to ensure that cybersecurity is both inclusive, collaborative, and adaptable.
Well, that's a great intro to what CIS is all about and our organization. One of the things that we're really focused on these days is especially being relevant and focused on what we consider to be the cyber underserved. And there are many different aspects of that. We think that healthcare falls into that space. And so we are really putting a big effort into enabling organizations in the healthcare space with cybersecurity best practices and tools to actually make that better. And so what I'm going to talk about next, and we'll kind of go in order here. We'll start with just what's happening at a macro level in healthcare right now. as you all probably know, it's an interesting time between what's happening from government policy perspective and what's expected on the healthcare front. And then we'll dig a little bit more deeply into some specific things that healthcare organizations deal with that are a little bit different, or even a lot different than your typical organization as it relates to how you respond to an incident and what kind of things you take into consideration when you're securing an environment. And then we'll talk more specifically about the actual tools that we have in place and some of the things that you could leverage every day as a therapist in the field. And Matt's going to cover that piece of it for us. So I'll start by giving you a little high level overview on the next slide, which is what's happening currently in cybersecurity and healthcare. U.S. healthcare is a big deal as it relates to the U.S. economy. It's currently about 18% of the total gross domestic product. It has been identified as one of the 16 critical infrastructures by the federal government. That means that there is additional focus and resources available to those folks in those sectors. And you're in the company of people in the energy sector, in manufacturing, in water, and other critical infrastructures for the United States. And so what we found as we dug into helping out organizations that are designated with this critical infrastructure designation is that, and based on what's happened recently with some attacks, it is definitely an underserved market in the sense that healthcare has traditionally invested in cybersecurity relative to other critical infrastructures. And so what that means is that hackers are aware of that and can use, let's call it, less sophisticated attack tactics to gain entry. And they've been pretty successful in doing that. If you watch the news, obviously we always reference the Change Healthcare attack that happened last year, but there are many, many, many examples of hospital providers, of insurance companies, small and large, who are dealing with this issue and have had to have their operations upset and had to face significant financial penalties, not only from paying ransoms but the cost of not being able to provide full services to their patients. So with all of that as a background, cybersecurity could be moving forward to mandated cybersecurity protections. We'll go to the next slide. And that's the big question right now. Are federal cybersecurity regulations coming? Well, it's an open question, as many things are in Washington these days. But here's what we do know. After the Change Healthcare attack that occurred in 2024, several bipartisan bills were introduced to strengthen cybersecurity regulations. Now, this is new in the sense that we've always had HIPAA, and of course, data protection and PHI has always been a very big focus for the healthcare organizations. But this legislation was the first time that resilience was part of the conversation. And the term resilience I'll use in this way. It is about actually providing security controls that are being monitored by regulatory requirements. Take, for example, email security or multi-factor authentication on web-facing applications. Currently, all of those are guidelines and voluntary, but this legislation has some teeth in it regarding how you would actually have to implement that and report that you've got those protections in place. Another important component of that is the proposed rule that just finished up its question phase, which is HIPAA 2.0. HIPAA 2.0 is coming out. And in that, they have, in addition to strengthened data protection, also resiliency and requirements around the IT infrastructure that will need to be in place in order to get full reimbursement or not be penalized by the Office of Civil Rights, for example. So that's what we know is on the table as of now. All of that is subject to change with the new administration. I think, especially in HHS, with the leadership there, we really don't know what's going to come about. But in conversations with folks in the government, both in the legislative side and on the executive side, definitely still a bipartisan appetite to do something to help safeguard healthcare organizations. So we'll go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what is different about healthcare at a high level, because if you think about protecting an organization, what we'll find is that the things that you need to do to protect an IT infrastructure are similar and the same across the organizations. Usually, 80% of what you do for an EndReach company is the same for a bank. But then there's that 20% difference, and healthcare definitely has that, where it's got some unique needs. And I'll go through each of these as we talk this through. So on the next slide, we'll talk about what drives historic change in healthcare, right? I think this is going to come to no surprise of you who've been in the industry for a long time. Obviously, what we talked about already, response to regulatory requirements and legislation, that's always a big deal, whether it's HIPAA or meaningful use or some of the other things that have come about. Then any kind of revenue or cost time savings are certainly something that will be a consideration. Some of the AI tools that are coming on board. I was just at HIMSS last week, and there's a lot coming into the marketplace. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI later in this presentation. And of course, improving patient care, making it better. Those are the motivating factors. So when you look at some of the specific challenges, the first one that really jumps out is going to be elevated third-party risk. There are few industries in the world that require or rely on third parties more than healthcare. Whether that be the relationship you have with a primary care organization or a hospital, or if you're getting a pharmacy services from a third party, or if you're getting revenue cycle services from somewhere else, the keys to running your operation successfully rely on so many different entities, and each one of those entities introduce third-party risk. So having a plan around how you're vetting your third-party contractors or partners is extremely important with making that happen. And one of the things that's interesting, I sit on a organization called the Health Coordinating Council, and we are responsible for helping the HHS put in place regulations and guidance that will help the industry writ large. One of the things they're doing right now, we're really focused on, is looking for those single points of failure within the healthcare continuum to be able to identify how many change healthcares are there out there. Are there other single points of failure that would have impact across the whole ecosystem? And so we're in the process of understanding and trying to drive that, because that's an extremely important part of making sure that healthcare is covered. It's really important as an individual provider or as a member of this ecosystem to do your due diligence and to make that happen yourself as well. Next slide. The next one is also a huge one, which is acquisition and consolidation. Again, the business dynamic, especially on the for-profit side, is driven around acquisition and consolidation. And if you think about it, what you deal with there is that weakest link issue. You may have the most solid processes in place and the latest technology, but that organization that you bring on brings with it not only the benefit that you're getting from that organization, but also potential liabilities if they don't have the same kind of level of rigor or the same technology stacks that are enabled to protect. This is going to be a big problem for you as an organization. So due diligence is extremely important, and having a strategy around your acquisitions by being able to validate what that environment looks like. And fortunately, CIS has some great not only tools and guidance to help with that process and bring best practices to bear to drive that acquisition and consolidation piece.
Hey, Mike, just a thought to put this into the world of our audience. Whenever a rehab provider, like our friends at NARA, the membership, when you acquire a new contract, and take over a new facility, whether it's going from one provider to another or whether it's an in-house program to your contracted rehab company. This affects your organization because you have to adapt into the infrastructure of the new building that you're working in now. So very important as you think about your organization as you acquire new contracts.
Yeah, great point, Matt. Thank you. Next, of course, is going to be continuity of operations. One of the things that will happen inside of a hospital organization when there are, especially a ransomware event occurs, is the time that it takes to get back online can be significant. And it's not just about the day-to-day operations, which will absolutely be impacted, but also what happens from a perspective of recovering from that and getting yourself back into a strong financial position. Talking to some organizations, on average, we see if a ransomware event happens and there is widespread impact, in other words, they're not able to necessarily localize it, you can see upwards of 45 to 60 days of being offline. And what offline means is operating on paper if you have to. One of the challenges with operating on paper these days is that there's not very many people who know how to do it anymore. We've gotten to a point now where there are folks who are very computer savvy and are used to using the tools, and once they go away, going back to the trifold is a real challenge. So that's a big issue. Next slide. And of course, this is kind of goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. The stakes here are extremely high. When a downtime event occurs, when a cybersecurity event happens in a healthcare setting, lives are at risk, and patient safety comes first. Unfortunately, that is known by the bad guys. And previously to, I don't know when it started, but there was a time when bad actors would not target healthcare organizations. They were kind of off limits. That unfortunately is no longer the case. And bad actors will target, knowing because it's going to be relatively easy for them to get in, and also that there's going to be a high likelihood that the ransomee will pay. Is always a challenge. So that's why the stakes are so high, and why training is important, and making sure things are moving forward from that perspective. And then the last, I believe this is the last one. This is a complex IT infrastructure that we have found ourselves in, whether that be MedRec or pharmacy, or pulling information out of your supply chain, or the clinical operations. All of that makes for a very complex environment with multiple operating systems, with multiple servers, with multiple endpoints. All of it has to work together seamlessly to make happen, but it creates a scenario where there's a lot of ways to get in, and there's a lot of exploits that can be taken advantage of that are unique to healthcare. So this is another place, having the technical depth and understanding to be able to secure an infrastructure is always a big challenge, and having the people who know how to do that across all of these technologies is also a huge challenge. To top it all off of all the stuff I've talked about, make it tough in healthcare, we're introducing another one, which of course we know has great impact, both positively and something that we need to be cautious about as well. But like I said, I was at HIMSS recently, and being able to see some of the amazing things that AI is doing as it relates to things like image analysis to detect cancer, or making the revenue cycle process more automated. There are amazing things that are going on in this space, but there's got to be also a policy in place. Now, it's interesting, CIS, you would think, would have a policy specific to AI, and actually right now we don't. And the reason for that is our controls, if adopted correctly, will enable you to cover any kind of AI tool or technology that will be in your environment. In other words, if you're focusing on the fundamentals of a solid security controls implementation, introducing AI will have the same, will have a limited impact on what you have to do. And what I mean by that is, for example, if the AI tool, you want to understand what does that AI tool do with your data? Well, there's already a strong data protection vetting process that we have outlined in our controls. Or if you want to understand who's going to get access to that and where that information is going, we have controls in place for all of that. I will say this does represent an interesting challenge. I've heard some stories out in the field where, we'll have providers actually using things like Chat GPT to complete their clinical notes, and then do some copy and pasting and putting that into the EMR. Obviously, that is a practice we do not recommend. It is something that definitely will violate policy, namely because the data that goes into that goes into effectively OpenAI's database, and is effectively a public domain issue at that point. Those are the kind of issues that you really need to look for when you're vetting an AI tool: is how is the data going to be used? What are the use cases for it? Will I own processes that I develop that may be proprietary? All important things that will need to be thought through, especially as it relates to a cybersecurity protection. So
Awesome.
with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. So for all the PTs, OTs, and speech on the call, and our nurses too, certainly let's take the conversation into your world and finding that balance between being secure and still maintaining the subject that's near and dear to your hearts, which is productivity, of course. So certainly we understand the pressure that therapists are under to complete treatments, meet a productivity threshold, and get your documentation done on time, and then do it again and again and again. And we get it. We understand how challenging that is. With electronic documentation systems being in place, you need to be connected. You need to get to the internet. Are those connections always secure? And even if they are secure, doesn't mean they're not vulnerable. Doesn't mean that the bad guys can't access them. They're very, very good at it. So what happens when there is a problem? Do you just call the guy? Well, the guy is very valuable, the IT guy, of course. And whether your IT department is internal to your company, it's external to your client, to the building, or either, they need cybersecurity tools and best practices. They need to know where to get them and how to use them. And that is exactly where we come in. So some of the special challenges faced by therapy providers: anytime there's an interruption, your day is going to fall off track really quickly. And operations, patient care, patient schedules, your productivity, billing, and frankly, everyone else's day gets impacted. And that's a real tough situation to be in. And how do you know, is it a security breach or a real routine problem for the IT folks to fix? So we're going to try and help you with that a little bit. Now you're probably saying, wait a minute, I'm a therapist. I didn't know it was my job to identify a security breach. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. That's okay. But let's think about it from this perspective. How can we help the organization strike that balance between security and allowing the clinicians to do their very best to perform patient care? What can I do within my role to help? How do we establish a security culture for the good of the organization and, most importantly, the patients? What's a reasonable amount of staff education and where to get it? And where do we even start? With all that, where do I even begin? So let's have a little fun with it and let's find that balance together. Okay. So I thought that we'd begin is to level set for our audience here. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. What are the most common types of cyber threats so we can all be on the lookout for them? How can we really start if we don't know what we're looking for? So let's have a little fun with it. And hopefully you'll take these slides and keep them and refer back to them in the future. So we've all heard the phrase malware. What exactly that means? So exactly what that means, it's intrusive software that cyber criminals have installed into your computer, often without you even knowing it, and it's destroying your systems and your network. Okay, and sometimes that's a link or an email that we get that looks suspicious, or we've heard the term phishing. All of those things lead to malware being installed on our systems. Okay. We've heard the word ransomware. Mike referred to it in the context of Change Healthcare, and that is the biggest example in healthcare in our lifetimes. Okay. And what that is that the threat actors have installed a malicious software that blocks access to your system and are not going to give it back until money is paid. It really is pay us or else. Okay. Here's another good one too, and this is very important. This is a big misconception out there in the world. It's called web application hacking. Okay. We all have what are called web-based applications that we use every single day. This is when the cyber criminals essentially break into those systems and collect data and then use it to get to your network. Okay. So any of those applications, think of 5, 10 programs that you use every day, every week. Those all have vulnerability. And the bad guys can, in theory, use them to gain access to the entire network. Here's another one. This is called insider privilege and misuse. That's when the threat actors will infiltrate a system and get the administrative credentials that has access to everything. Okay, that's really bad because that makes it really easy for them. And the last one is an interesting one called a targeted intrusion. And that's a calculated effort by a threat actor to infiltrate based on a person. Okay, they're targeting a person. And I actually almost came very close to falling victim to this recently. But when they target a specific person, then they're gaining access to steal sensitive data and disrupt the clinical operations. Well, now that we're all scared out of our minds, what do we do so that we don't either go broke or go out of business or both? The most important thing to do is to adopt an organizational approach. Okay. It really takes the organization having a plan and an easy plan to follow step by step. And as an organization, when you begin by defining what is reasonable, what exactly do I have to do? Because the standard for a mega bank or a mega equipment manufacturer in healthcare that does business around the world versus a mom and pop physiotherapy office or lab radiology pharmacy, something like that, that you folks interact with every day. What's reasonable is different for everyone. So after the webinar, we are going to provide all attendees today with a white paper from CIS called Our Guide to Reasonable Cybersecurity. It's a great read, it's an easy read, and it's very informative. But it starts with having an organizational approach, having a plan. Like,
so great, Matt. That was great. So what we'll talk about around this organizational approach is now how CIS can play a pivotal role in making that happen. CIS has been around for about 25 years now, and through that time, we have developed what's called the CIS Critical Security Controls. The critical security controls are not our, we're not authoring those. We facilitate best practices coming from global experts across the cybersecurity industry to create these best practices. And the great thing about them is that they are very simple, prescriptive, and easy to understand. If you look at the next slide, it will show you the controls, and there are 18 of them. Underneath each one of those, they have what are called safeguards, and there are 153 total safeguards. Now, it starts with number 1, which is the most important thing, and it goes all the way to 18. And from our perspective, number 1 is most important, number 2 is the second most important, and so on and so forth. Understanding your inventory and what you have in your environment, understanding your software, and understanding your data is where you start with all of that. And you go from there around how to secure that and make it happen. You may be saying to yourself, wow, that's a lot, 153 things to think about. And it is, but one of the things that we have done is create something called implementation groups. And if you look at an implementation group, we have divided it into 3 because we understand that not all providers are the same. Some are large and have very complex needs and have their own dedicated staffs. Some are very small and probably don't even have an IT person on board. So we have these 3 different versions. Implementation group 1 would be considered something for a small business. And as you can see, instead of having 153 safeguards, you only have 23 safeguards. So the requirements that you would need to have to ensure security for a smaller, less complex environment is much less onerous than it would be, say, for a large organization where you'd have to have all 153 in place to really consider yourself safe and secure. So great opportunity for organizations that don't have the resources and the bandwidth to really apply something that's going to be right sized for their needs. And if you do that, what you'll see is you're going to get yourself into a very strong position. Using the community defense model, what you'll find is that against the top 5 attacks that Matt just went through, you can safeguard yourself up to a percentage that makes you a very hard target, a difficult nut to crack as far as getting access to sensitive information. So upwards of 70 to 80% by just implementing implementation group 1, those 23 safeguards, to make sure that you can protect yourself against malware, ransomware, web application attacking, and so on. It goes all the way up into the 90% if you use all of those. So you can see just by doing the basics, you're going to put yourself in a very strong position. Now, the other part of this that's really important to understand is not only are you doing this from a protecting of your environment, but we are operating in a very regulated regulated environment here. And so what does that mean? It means you'll need to adhere to certain frameworks. The good news is that CIS controls map to many, many different frameworks across the spectrum. I've circled a couple here that are very specific to the environment you'd be in. HIPAA being at the top of the list, PCI being another one, which is credit card management, the NIST CSF, which is the government piece. So there's many, many frameworks that you will have confidence knowing that you map to, and if the HHS OCR comes knocking at your door, you can demonstrate that. The other thing that you can do here by implementing this, and this is an important piece that is coming up, which is going to be state and local regulations. Many, many local states, I think that's on the next slide, Matt. Oh, sorry, I missed one first. There is, I'll go back and just say that the healthcare cybersecurity controls from HHS have recently been released, and we map to that as well. So knowing that we map back to the HHS sponsored controls is something that's very important to us. But what I was going to say about this is that the data privacy laws are starting to come into play that are a little more onerous and a little more restrictive with regard to what you need to do. And so having a framework like CIS in place is going to be the expectation. As a matter of fact, in some of these states, the CIS controls are called out specifically as a framework that you can use to make sure that you're adhering to some of those privacy laws that are in place. Another important point of that is that insurance companies, if you do get yourself in cyber insurance, there will oftentimes, I would say in most cases, require that you have done reasonable things to ensure that your cybersecurity that you have a cybersecurity plan in place. Going back to what Matt talked about earlier, the reasonable security, having the CIS framework is definitely a reasonable framework. And insurance companies know that if you've adopted the CIS controls, you'll be in a much better position if you are attacked to be able to be successful with your claim.
For our audience today, if you do business in one of these states, if you're taking care of servicing buildings in one of these states, we should definitely continue this conversation, because you all know how different, crossing a state border is like crossing into a different universe sometimes. But this is definitely something that we should be mindful of, and we're glad to help when you have buildings that you service in these states. And one other thing, the state of Ohio should be colored in as well. I know that that's one, and I couldn't find the right map that includes it. So our regards to our friends in Ohio. It should be colored in green as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So to go back to what I was talking about earlier, the solutions in healthcare and unique problems, each one of these can be addressed by implementing the controls and or our technology benchmarks, whether that be the continuity of data and data protection. We certainly can do that. Having a process in place for third-party risks. We have a CS control that's specific to third-party risks. Acquisition and consolidation. We didn't really get into it, but as we dig into our suite of tools, we have tools that can actually help with the process to manage acquisition and consolidation and manage your risk around that. Obviously, with high stakes and complex infrastructure, these are needs for the CIS controls as well. And so our membership called SecureSuite is something that would definitely benefit those. I'll start by saying that that our controls and benchmarks are absolutely free. As a nonprofit, we provide these for free, but then we have some value-added tools that Matt's going to talk about that can help implement some of those free benchmarks and controls.
Sure. So anyone, for the IT professionals, especially on the call today, organizational leadership, compliance officers, we encourage you to go to our website, cisecurity.org, and go to the CIS controls and download yourself a copy of them. Okay, they're free tools. The technology benchmarks, which are right in the middle here, those are used by IT professionals to secure devices, servers, firewalls, laptops, all those things that you hear about, but you probably as a clinician really care most about your laptop. And what those are doing is help to secure them to the highest level. So all those tools we wrap around other tools that accelerate the implementation of them. And those are called our SecureSuite. And we're going to talk about a special offer for our good friends in the NARA membership on becoming a member of our SecureSuite. So the tools that are included are our controls, which is a security framework, the benchmarks, which are guidelines to configure those devices like the laptops, servers, routers, firewalls, etc., to make those individual devices more secure. Therefore, your collective network and every person who touches it becomes more secure. I hope that makes sense in your world as clinicians. Other really exciting tools are CSAT Pro, measures how an organization implements the controls over a lifetime. The SysCat Pro Assessor is what IT professionals, security professionals use to scan devices to see just how secure they are. One of our solution engineers that we work with very closely, we were with him yesterday, says that the Dell laptop that we buy on Amazon for our mom is about 29% secure on a scale of 1 to 100, just to give you perspective of how low typical security settings are. And therefore, hopefully you learned today just how vulnerable those can be. Other tools, our SysCat Pro dashboard is a way to measure how secure configurations are. The SysRAM measures and helps you to mitigate and reduce risk. And our workbench is an online community for our members, kind of like Reddit, to interact with other professionals. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to interact with other professionals about security and technology that do the same things you do every day? Like,
And that's a great overview. We have a few different types of memberships. If you are just wanting to implement these in your organization, we have what's called an end user membership. We also have a membership for folks who are in the services and consulting space, who can use these tools as part of your consulting engagements to help with best practices. And then finally, if you happen to have a platform that you want to use, integrate the CIS tools into, and we have many, many software vendors that do this, you can actually get a membership for a vendor and implement the CIS security tools inside of your product.
so, because we're very excited about our relationship and our membership with NARA, we want to help you. And we are able to provide a special discount on CIS membership. And oh, by the way, don't panic. Our tools, we mentioned we're a nonprofit. Our tools do not cost $100,000 and more. We are here to promote adoption of our tools so that we can further our mission, which is to help the cyber underserved, like Mike said at the beginning. So we definitely love to help you. Thank you for attending our special webinar as a token of our appreciation. The promo code NARA25, write that down, is what you'll need to access the discount. And Mike and I will guide you through that process a little bit. That link right there will be helpful as well. Our email addresses, we will leave them up on the screen, so you can either snap a picture of it, write it down, whatever you normally do to keep track of those things. But we are here to help. And before Christy talks about the spring conference, which is coming up, Christy, do we have any questions from our audience?
It does not look like we have any questions yet, but this is your opportunity to, excuse me, ask any questions of our speakers in any manner. If you have any questions related to cybersecurity, or maybe how your organization is currently handling it, or any types of tricks or tips that you would like to know, please feel free to use the Q&A button on your attendee toolbar and enter your question into the application so that we can share those with Matt and Michael. Thank you guys so much. We do have a question. How would this work if an organization that utilizes a contract IT company?
That's a great question and very common question. So really there's two ways. One, and I'm going to just go back a couple slides. So if you want to use the tool set within Secure Suite for your own use, you become a member of CIS directly with the end user membership. The other option is for the IT company we offer a special membership for them, and it has different what we call use cases for them so that they can use it in their engagement. So to answer your question, Rex, we offer two different options for an organization that uses a contracted IT company. Great question.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too. We actually just yesterday we had a meeting with a small to mid-sized provider network in Southern California, and they were in the same situation where they contracted most of their IT to an IT provider, or what's called an MSP. they brought the MSP on the call. We would welcome that too. So if you're interested in having a discussion with your MSP and us to understand what you can control and what they control, it's a great conversation because from that, we came out with some great ideas of how that provider is going to put those controls in place, and also how the MSP, the IT consultant, is going to help them do that. So great scenario for sure.
Another thing that they found in that example were some holes in what they were doing and how they can shore those up in terms of other software products that they are licensing. Great stuff. Any more questions?
Yes, we actually do. In your opinion, where would be the best location to, I believe this is store our PHI that is not located on our EMR? We are working through a few different areas: Microsoft OneDrive, our drives, or Google Sheets.
Whew. Geez. In my first thought, Mike, in order to answer that, we'd need to know about the encryption level related. Are they PHI related encryption as part of those? Just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I would. The good news is that you're using either it's Google or Microsoft. Google or Microsoft are used to handling PHI, and they will probably likely have some very specific guidance around what you would do, say, with a Google Sheet, and how that might need to be handled differently than it would be if it was just a regular data. So I would absolutely rely on the guidance of both Microsoft and Google as it relates to best practices for how you would do that. Certainly, you're going to have data that is going to be stored in various places. You just want to make sure that you're adhering to what your organization is wanting to do. But those are two good partners that I'm sure you can get some good guidance from.
Okay. And then you did mention the final rule earlier. Has the final rule been issued yet, or was that just the proposed rule, correct?
Great question.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say the comment period for the proposed rule closed last Friday. From what we heard anecdotally, the comments were highly negative against the rule the way it was written. So, Mike, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, although that came from the provider, so we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
Again, there's no way to know. I wish I could, even give you a kind of a reading of the tea leaves, but I've been surprised before, and I think it could go either direction. I have a feeling that at some point, whether it's going to be HIPAA now, the HIPAA 2.0, whether that will have some actual teeth in it regulatory wise, if that doesn't happen, then I'm pretty certain within the next few years you're going to see legislation that comes out. There seemed to be enough focus on folks who are, committee chairs and folks like that who definitely wanted to see something happen legislatively on this question. So that's what I know.
Great. So just so everybody is aware, just a reminder, we're all used to the rulemaking process, and while our funding proposed rules, so physician fee schedule and SNF that we're used to, the final rule coming out promptly. Not all rules in the rulemaking process are finalized promptly. So we don't really know exactly when they will come out with a final on this rule. So stay tuned, and we will definitely keep you posted on that. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, but we still have 10 minutes left. So I'm going to take the opportunity to remind everybody about our conference that's coming up. We are really excited about this. This is our annual regulatory and legislative conference. We also have a pre-conference that is attached. It is separate registration, but on Tuesday, April 29th, we will have a half-day session on AI and healthcare, and we have a really robust agenda. and speakers. We are excited to be able to share some of the speakers that we have coming, but we're going to keep it under wraps for about another week. So watch our social media and watch your email for all the updates on that pre-conference. Very exciting information and speakers. So you're definitely going to want to join us for that. And then the 3-day conference will follow that. So April 30th through May 2nd. May 2nd, we will wrap up around noon. But this is our 3-day regulatory and legislative focused updates. We will have Hill visits, and we schedule those. We have a vendor that we work with, and they schedule those. So you let us know your home address on your registration, and we will schedule those with you. If you've never been to the Hill before to do advocacy meetings with your congressional member offices, we'll send somebody with you. You won't go alone. Trust me, you will not be alone. So we hope that you will join us. Wednesday will be filled with a lot of legislative and regulatory updates. So we are going to talk about value-based care. We're going to talk about Medicare Advantage. We're going to talk about the shift in power and its impact on rules and regulations that are happening. So make sure you get registered and joined. Our early bird pricing expires at the end of this month. So check it out at www.naranet.org/education. Matt and Michael will be there on Friday morning giving us a much deeper dive into cybersecurity and the impact that it has on therapy providers, and much more about details on what you can do to protect yourselves and your patients. So make sure you join us for the spring conference in Washington, D.C. All right. Well, it doesn't look like anybody has put any more questions in. So thank you guys for being here and providing us such great information on how we can protect ourselves, how we can protect our patients, and how we can protect our clients. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in May in DC.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Bye-bye.